So if you take a look at this, we do have pattern C has now been given to us. So pattern C is handed to us as an equation this time. As a reminder, and you can see it in the table, the figure number has been identified as X. I'm still going to color code it orange since that's what we've been using the whole time. So my figure number is X. Then we have the number of tiles is going to be Y. Color coding it green, sticking with what I did in the first chapter. What we want to do is we want to take that equation of Y is equal to 3x plus 1, and we want to figure out what the Y values are for specific X's. So if somebody says, okay, you've got figure number 5, then I'm going to say, okay, I have this many tiles in figure number 5. I should be able to figure that out based off of this equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our equation. So I'm going to go ahead and do my work right underneath the table. I'm going to write down the equation, which was given to me as Y is equal to 3x plus 1. Then the first figure number that I'm asked to plug in is x equals 0. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take x equals 0, and I'm going to copy down my equation, except everywhere I see an x now, I'm actually going to plug a 0 in. So that's going to give me 3. Use your parentheses when you plug stuff in. You'll notice the only thing left is y. This is good. This is, again, a lot like last chapter. So we're going to go ahead and follow order of operations and solve for y. So y is equal to 3 times 0, which is 0, and then 0 plus 1, which is 1. Okay, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to color code this a little bit as I go. So that was my first value that I found. That was when x is equal to 0. So I'm going to go back to the table. I'm going to find the table entry where x is equal to 0, and then my job is to fill in the y value that goes with it. So I'm going to plug in y equals 1. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the rest of the entries. So my recommendation to you at this point would be to start plugging the numbers in. You might actually see a pattern emerge in the y's. And if you think you find the pattern, or if you see the pattern from the equation, go ahead and fill in the rest of the y values that are being asked of you. Okay, so double check yours against mine. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. No? All right, I think pretty good. So now we've gone ahead and filled in the table. So now we're finding more relationships where we started with an equation this time, and then we're moving down to a table. We want to see if we can figure out the relationship with how we find the growth and how we find the starting value. So we can look at the table to find that. We can also look at the equation to find that. So if I want to think about the growth, well, the growth itself is going to be how many more tiles are being added or subtracted. We'll get to subtracting later. From figure to figure. So if we take a look at this, and I look just specifically at the table, I want to make sure that, and it will be the case here in the beginning, but they do get a little bit more complicated as we go. I want to make sure that I'm not just looking at the y's, I want to make sure I'm looking at the x's also. So we're going to do a quick check on the x's. I want to look in between each of those x's. So from 0 to 1, we ideally want that jump to be positive 1. So like to go from 0 to 1, you plus 1. Go from 1 to 2, you plus 1. For now, that should be consistent. It does change though, and then become a little bit more complicated as we go. So at this point, it's going to be a plus 1. Okay, with that said, if the x is just plus 1 the entire time, which is really nice, then we really do only have to take the y's into consideration. But it's a special case if it's the ones on the x's. So let's look at the y's now. So if I take a look at the y's, and I'm trying to figure out the growth that's happening here, I hope everybody sees that this is going to be plus 3 the entire time. So from 1 to 4, plus 3. 4 to 7, plus 3. 7 to 10, plus 3. So I think our growth is going to be plus 3. Notice, if you go back to the equation, we can see that the growth was 3 because of the form of the equation. So I'm going to go back up to the top. Remember, the value that is attached to the x, so it's that mx, that is going to be the growth. Just the number, not the x, so it's just the 3. Let's see if we can figure out the starting value from the table and then relate it back to the equation. Okay, look at the table. Starting value, the key to finding the starting value is figure 0. That's what we want for sure. So if I take a look at the table, and all I really care about is figure 0, I'm going to look right there. Figure 0, how many tiles? It's 1. So my starting value is 1, which I could also see in the equation. Go back up to the top. The number that is being added or subtracted at the end, that's also your starting value. So what we have here is this nice relationship where if we have the equation, we can see the growth in the starting value, but we can also see it in the table, which we could also see in the tile patterns that we did as the warm-up and what we did yesterday in class. Okay, another problem, just like what we just did. So what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to take the next, I think probably 4 minutes. 4, yeah, I think 4 should be good. I want you to complete the table, and I want you to identify the growth and the starting value. Okay, so I've filled in my table. You can go ahead and check yours against mine. Again, showed all my work. I realized that you might have started seeing the pattern already, or you could have inspected the equation and seen what your starting value and your growth are. So we can extract it from the equation and we can extract it from the table. So let's see if we can do the starting value first, only because there's very little work done. You just look at the table and make sure you're looking at the right spot. So my starting value, I care about figure number 0. That's the one that I want. So like in the beginning, this all started somehow. That's what we're looking for. So I know that my starting value is going to be 3. And remember, it is the Y value. It's the starting number of tiles that you had. The growth is, well, how many tiles do you keep adding? Okay, so I'm going to do that quick look again and make sure I take a look at the X's. And for now, it really will be plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, but it gets more complicated. So I want to make sure that we keep looking there just in case. So I'm looking at the top. Those are all 1s. So I feel pretty good about just looking at the Y's. So if I now just look at the Y's, it looks like it's plus 2 to me. Now, to be clear, it has to be the same number that you're adding over and over and over again. It can't be a different number. It can't be like plus 2 and then plus 5 and then minus 8. It's got to be plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. Same number repeatedly. So I know that my growth is going to be plus 2, which I could have found by looking at my equation. So if you look up at the very top, remember the equation is mx plus b. So we can find the things. The m is right there. M equals 2. Remember, m is growth. So we could have found it just by looking directly at the equation. B, same idea. So it is the number that's added or subtracted at the end. In this case, it's 3, and that represents the starting value. You're going to see a bit of a difference here. Question 5 is another way to take a look at this tile pattern linear equation table business that we've been doing. You could actually have the problem written out in words for you. Your job is to be able to dissect that information and find what you need. So if we take a look, there are 6 tiles in figure 0. That's important. That has been our starting value. So I think I know what the start is. So my starting value is going to be 6. So however many tiles are in figure 0. Number of tiles, figure 0. All right. Now I think we have the growth coming up next. So like, how is this thing changing? What's happening from one figure to the next? In this case, it says we have 4 tiles that are being added. Okay, that's important. It's told us how many, and it's also told us if it's adding or if it's subtracting. Remember, we'll get to subtracting. So 4 tiles are added in each new figure. All right, we're being told what the growth is. So how it's changing. So 4 tiles are being added. I should now, with this information, be able to write my equation. So take this opportunity before I write it down, so you can write it down yourself, and then check yours against mine. Okay, so I wrote down my equation, y equals mx plus b. I identified that my growth is m and my starting value is b. Now I'm just going to slide them in where they belong. So y equals, there's the m, take it out, put the 4 in its place. Bring the x with you. Plus, there's the b, take it out, put the starting value in. I think our equation is y is equal to 4x plus 6. Okay, question 6. In question 6, I've given you a completed table. And by that, I've given you enough information for you to be able to figure out what the pattern is from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's consistent. That's important. What I would like you to do is I want you to see if you can use the table like we did on the previous slide. So question 3, 4, and 1, 2. And see if you can write the equation of this. Taking a look at my table, I want to be able to find the starting value, which I know I can just by looking for figure 0. So figure 0 and however many tiles are in it. So I know that my starting value is going to be 8. And I know that my starting value in the equation is identified by b. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a b next to it so I know where it goes in the equation. Now, my growth. All right, first thing we definitely want to check. Make sure that you look at the x's and that they're only increasing by 1. I know, I said that they all would right now, which is true, but we're trying to train your eyes for future problems. So, I want to go by 1, good, and by 1. All right, so now we can kind of ignore them now that we know it's by 1. Now we got to look at the y's. And we want to try to figure out what number is repeatedly being added to be able to get the next number of tiles. And I believe that this is plus 5. That number that you keep adding repeatedly, that's your growth. So I would say that my growth, which I'm going to identify as m, because that's where it goes in the equation, is going to be a positive 5 or plus 5. Okay, now I can write my equation. So I'm going to take those things and I'm going to plug them in where they go. So my equation is y equals mx plus b. Now I'm just going to slide the things in where they belong. So y equals, okay, my m was my growth. That is a positive 5. Bring the x with you, plus however many tiles you had in figure 0, which is 8. That is the correct answer to question number 6.